Good day and welcome to the ProCamera tutorial for advanced users. In this tutorial you will get an overview of the manual controls in ProCamera and learn how to use them. First we need to enable manual mode. In the control panel, tap on A and switch to the manual M mode or the semi-automatic SI mode. We use the semi-automatic mode. SI stands for shutter and ISO priority. You can recognize that you are in manual mode when a single lens in the lens selector has a blue contour line around it. When you change a lens in manual mode, it takes a moment because the camera has to be reconfigured. In auto mode, when the focus and exposure elements are located in the center and become invisible, exposure and focus work automatically. If exposure has been locked, it will automatically lock again once the exposure circle is placed off-center. For manual focus with magnifier, first lock focus by long press, tap and hold. Then swipe vertically across the screen to change the focus manually. Alternatively, you can also adjust the focus manually with a focus dial. To do this, tap on MF. The focus square becomes invisible, and when you move the dial, you see focus peaking all over the viewfinder and no magnifier. This method of manual focus adjustment via dial, is especially useful for macro shooting. Tap SI to make manual exposure adjustments. The focus remains locked to the previously set value. Tap WB to set color cast and color temperature manually. Now all settings are locked and the camera control is now fully manual. You will see in the manual controls panel that all buttons are underlined. Tap on an inactive button to display the corresponding controls. Tap the active button, that means the blue colored one, to switch the corresponding control back to automatic mode. Tapping the center of the preview image switches the control of focus square and exposure circle back to automatic mode. Now the camera works fully automatic again. By the way, by having the focus in the center, the so-called focus pixels can be used, which allows very fast automatic focusing. The only difference to the A mode here is that only a single lens is in use and no multi-lens image fusion takes place. There are several levels of manual control. Typically, you want the finished image to be as free of blur as possible, with no areas that are over or underexposed. This is why Smart HDR and optical image stabilization are active by default, even in manual mode. However, special situations may require you to deactivate this automatic image enhancement. A good example for this are so-called panning photos, where you align yourself and the camera to a moving object and pan while shooting. The goal is to have the subject in focus and the background deliberately blurred. Here's an example of how to take a panning shot in a very bright scene without any additional equipment. First we turn off HDR. Then we tap SI to activate the controls for semi-automatic exposure control. By tapping the exposure time indicator, we switch from ISO priority to shutter priority. Now we can set the exposure time manually and the camera automatically sets a suitable ISO value. To capture a panning shot in this scene, a longer exposure time is needed to avoid freezing the subject. A minimum of a 30th is recommended, though a 25th of a second or longer is ideal. The appropriate exposure time also depends on the type and speed of the subject being captured. The ISO value has reached the minimum and the image is overexposed with our preferred exposure time. The problem could be solved by using an ND filter to darken the scene or by waiting for dusk, but there is an elegant solution that is always available: the RAW format. To take photos in RAW format, we open the control panel and select RAW as the file type there. By the way, selecting RAW format implicitly disables HDR. RAW means no image processing, no image fusion, and therefore no HDR by combining multiple exposures. Now we also activate rapid fire for continuous shooting with the shutter button pressed. For all kinds of action photos, you should take as many photos as possible in a short time. This increases the probability of taking a really good photo a lot. Another way to deal with a too bright scene is to use the telephoto lens. This lens has a smaller aperture than the wide-angle lens and also a lower minimum ISO value. We switch to the telephoto lens by selecting it in the lens selector. After switching to this lens, we activate SI again and set the desired exposure time. You can see directly that the ISO value still has room to go down because of the smaller aperture of the telelens. Now just hold the shutter button down and move the camera along with the moving subject. In this photo, the exposure is ideal. Here we would have gotten a good result even without the RAW format. We like the analog look you can achieve with RAW photos. However, if you want to take photos like this in an even brighter environment, you would get overexposed shots even when using the telephoto lens. This is where we really need the RAW format. Here's an example of an overexposed photo taken with minimum ISO and the desired exposure time. Even with such an overexposed photo, you can still get a lot out of it thanks to RAW format. We open the photo in the photo studio and select the tools for editing RAW photos there. We reduce the exposure and you can see that even in the overexposed areas, there's still information that can be made visible this way. Then you can further edit the photo in other areas of the photo studio. It's a matter of taste, but for such a motive with burned out areas, high contrast black and white filters are particularly suitable. Let us know in the comments if this tutorial helped you and don't hesitate to ask questions.